great pleasure to welcome you to GMDC Connect's first ever video cast event. We're excited about what we're doing here and that you've taken the time out of your busy workday to join us for what promises to be a terrific session. Today's session, Amazon in Focus, is being led by Keith Anderson, the Vice President of Digital Strategy at RNG, one of GMDC's most important and loyal partners. Keith's going to take the time to show you and share with you the Amazon business model. And from a manufacturer perspective, he'll talk about strategies for doing business with Amazon. If you're a competitor on the wholesale or retail side, he'll also talk to you about concepts about how to most effectively compete against the Amazon model. And finally, he'll wrap things up before he does some Q&A, talking about the implications of the highly publicized Amazon Fresh rollout. Today's session is just the first of a number of terrific educational programs we'll be rolling out over the coming months. Just in November, we've got 3 more programs planned with RNG. November 5th, we'll be hosting a session on digital impulse merchandising strategies. And then on November 14th, we'll be taking a look at the future of small format stores. And finally, on November 19th, prior to the Thanksgiving holiday, we're going to take a look at retail health services. All great programs sponsored by our partners at RNG. And moving forward, we'll be calling on our other partners, Nielsen, to participate in this series of educational sessions as they'll get into the sponsorship role as well. So sit back, relax, have a good lunch, and enjoy a terrific session. I'll turn things over to Keith now. And again, thanks for being here. We greatly appreciate your support.
Thanks, Dave, and all of our partners at GMDC. Good afternoon, everyone. From a chilly Boston, Massachusetts, home of the 2013 World Series champions. It's great to be with you today to focus on a retailer that is incredibly high growth and at the same time incredibly challenging in many ways to compete with and also in many ways to do business with. So we're going to spend some time really unpacking their business model and for the manufacturers, some of the ways to maximize ROI doing business with Amazon. But I just want to emphasize up front that we've spent a lot of time speaking with current and former Amazon executives and others in the ecosystem. All of the analyses and conclusions presented today are the views of ourselves, our collaborators at IdeoClick, or other attributed parties. Nothing we say reflects the views of Amazon themselves or any other company mentioned. So, as you may be aware, we've done a lot of work on Amazon and in fact published over 400 slides in a piece called Amazon in Focus. And I'm not going to drag you through 400 slides today, but I did pull some of the highlights of our work on Amazon to cover over the next hour. And I want to start with putting Amazon in context, because what's very clear is globally in most developed markets defined as markets where sufficient GDP growth and formal retailing growth have taken place, brick and mortar retailing is growing on average in the low to mid single digits, typically 3 to 4%. And e-commerce is typically growing at a compound annual growth rate 2 to 3x brick and mortar retail. The run rate in the US is around 15% at the moment. Amazon, of course, is growing at yet a further multiple of even e-commerce. And so what's stunning is that in a growth sector, Amazon is growing at 2x all of e-commerce. They just reported their quarterly results, and top line revenue growth was around 25% again. And they are consolidating the non-store retail landscape in the US and in many of their international markets at a pace and a scale that we've never seen before, even from the world's largest brick and mortar retailers. So if you look on the right side of this chart, from 2007 to 2012, the last year for which we have full year data, Amazon increased their share of the e-commerce landscape from approximately 8% to 23%. And Amazon is the green section of this bar chart. You'll notice they took share during that period, not only from other pure play online retailers, which are the red, but from brick and mortar.com players, the Walmart.coms, Target.coms, Staples, and many, many others. So Amazon has been gaining share at the expense of both similar and slightly different competitors in the non-store retail world. And as we look out to 2016, Amazon is currently projected to capture close to a third of the entire non-store retail landscape, which is a faster ascent to high double-digit shares of the sector. And it's actually more market share than any other retailer we've ever studied has arrived at in its respective segment. So when we rank retailers globally, already today, Amazon is in the top 10 and in fact the top 5. And when we project them out to 2016, they're in the top 10 globally today. They'll be in the top 5 globally by 2016, based on their latest numbers, which would put them ahead of global leaders like Tesco and certainly domestic players ranging from Kroger, Target, Safeway, and many others. In fact, they're on pace to eclipse Target with just their 2013 full year revenue. And what's really important to respect is that these revenue numbers that we're referencing in that chart refer only to Amazon's reported revenues. And we'll describe this nuance in a bit more detail momentarily, but Amazon's business, as you probably appreciate, is very complex. And in their retail business, they have what is called their first party business, which is the most similar thing to a traditional retail business they do. They buy the merchandise from manufacturers, they take ownership of that inventory, and they manage all of the logistics of fulfilling those orders. They also have what they call the third-party marketplace, which is open to other merchants, sometimes professional merchants, but even individuals sometimes selling from their basements. And that third-party marketplace accounts for around 40% of the unit volume that Amazon sells in a typical year. And for the last several years, it had actually been growing faster than their first-party business. But the way that Amazon reports revenue to investors does not reflect the merchandise value of those third-party sales. Instead, Amazon only reports the fees that they are collecting from the third-party merchants. So if a third-party merchant sells an item for $20, Amazon reports the approximately 15% fee they collect on the sale of that product, but they don't report the value of that $20 product, which was still ultimately purchased on Amazon. And so the point of all this is that if you were to include, as we suggest everyone does, the gross merchandise value of the product sold not only by Amazon and fulfilled by Amazon themselves, but also third-party gross merchandise value, Amazon would already in 2012 rank as the 7th largest retailer globally, already 23% of global e-commerce sales, and close to $86 billion in annual gross merchandise value already today. So while the mainstream continues to look towards the back half of this decade for Amazon to reach 100 billion in sales, we think that that reality is actually much, much closer. Now, one of the questions that often arises as it relates to Amazon's growth trajectory is whether sales tax parity will fundamentally slow Amazon down. And we're about to experience this ourselves here in Massachusetts when Amazon begins collecting sales tax here on Friday. And I would tell you that what we know is having to collect sales tax absolutely will have an impact on Amazon and other pure play online retailer sales. You probably understand the way that the law is structured today. A player like Amazon has to collect sales tax in any state where they have a physical nexus, which is defined as either a fulfillment center or even administrative offices. And they've been very thoughtful and strategic over the last 15 years in locating both those types of facilities in states that are favorable and don't require them to collect or don't have any intention to. And the significance of that has been that Amazon has very often had a big price advantage, including the lack of sales tax versus their brick and mortar counterparts. But what we find important to consider is that globally already close to half of Amazon sales have some form of sales or value-added tax associated with them. And while in certain categories the impact on volume and velocity has been material, we think that there are a few really important factors to consider. The first of those is price point. Certainly on a $100 item, the significance of a 6 or 8% sales tax collection might change behaviors, so that for someone who really wants the product today, they may be willing to go to the store because they're anxious to get it now. But as the sales tax is collected on those items, the advantage that Amazon has will diminish somewhat. On a $10 item, it's not a big deal. And secondly, if the price gap between Amazon and the non-store player is 7%, as an example, it may be motivating to a shopper to have them wait the 2 days or longer that they need to wait before the product gets there. If it's a 3% gap, they're probably going to go to the store. And lastly, shipping speed. How quickly can they get the product is going to be a factor. And that's why you see such incredible investment from certain brick and mortar retailers, but even more so, third parties enabling same day and even 90-minute delivery from local brick and mortar retailers, because they all perceive that urgency as one of the final frontiers that Amazon is heading towards. So the net on this is that we do think that this proposed legislation, the Marketplace Fairness Act, will have a material impact on Amazon's growth. And yet, when you look at their broader strategy, which I'll describe in a minute, we think that as they are required to collect sales tax in more and more parts of the U.S. and internationally, they will fundamentally accelerate their shipping speed in a way that may offset any declines in volume from shoppers deciding it's not worth buying from Amazon with sales tax. So we're going to spend a lot of time talking about Amazon's strengths, but I hope everyone respects they absolutely have vulnerabilities. Their competition have large, loyal customer bases and a lot of local inventory. So in the context of fulfilling not only online orders, but local needs, brick and mortar still has a pretty significant advantage. And the truth is, the fundamental business model of non-store retailing is difficult. While it's been well publicized that Amazon, when they report to Wall Street, doesn't make money, we do believe that they are fully within their capability to make money. They're simply reinvesting everything they earn into growth and into new capabilities. But that doesn't change the fact that the economics of taking all of the work that shoppers do, picking orders and then delivering them to their own homes, taking that work over for shoppers is economically challenging. And as Amazon pushes further into the complexity of temperature controlled items with Amazon Fresh, it is a very challenging business to scale successfully. Thirdly, as I'll describe, Amazon is as much a technology company as a true retailer, and they are best thought of in many ways as a platform, not a partner. for manufacturers. And consequently, some vendors find them harder to work with. They find that the ask at Amazon, that is funding requirements, are expensive, and they find that the willingness to share some of the basics to help manage the business in a fact-based way is lacking. So I think brick and mortar competitors to Amazon have an advantage with their heritage of partnership and collaboration with manufacturers that Amazon still aspires to. There are several other things worth thinking about here, but the last one I'll mention is that Amazon, in its core business, is an item merchant. And that simply means the average order on Amazon is under 2 items. And that puts immense pressure on individual SKUs to be profitable as standalone items versus the blended economics of a full basket in a traditional brick and mortar store. Now, Amazon is clearly making a push both through Amazon Fresh, which is available today in Seattle and Los Angeles, and through a forthcoming program called Amazon Pantry that they haven't disclosed publicly, but that launches next year, trying to continue to tweak their supply chain and logistics model, as well as the way they engage shoppers to create a more economically viable business around faster moving goods over the long term, as well as some of the lower dollar value, sometimes lower margin goods that they know are essential to retaining frequency and loyalty with shoppers, but that are a little challenging economically for their traditional business model. So a very quick run through of their priorities for the next several years. There is no question Amazon remains fundamentally focused on growth and gaining share of the non-store segment of the categories they care about. If shareholders revolt and suddenly after one of these earnings releases, the share price starts to decline precipitously, as they have in the past, Amazon may once again check in with investors and demonstrate the ability to earn. But we think for the foreseeable future, they're still very focused on growth. They will continue to grow internationally. Their push into Canada this year is one of the more notable expansions they've done, but they're working hard in India, in China, and the UK remains an important market where you may see the expansion of programs like Amazon Fresh, which is perhaps for this group of retailers and suppliers, but I think for anyone interested in Amazon, one of the most significant initiatives underway at Amazon today. They just expanded into LA in June. We think they'll be live in San Francisco by the end of November. And there's no official word whether expansion to more markets in 2014 has been greenlit, but somewhere between a half dozen and 20 markets, everywhere from New York City to perhaps Dallas, Denver, Phoenix, and potentially others are under the consideration set for expansion next year. And we'll talk more about what the potential for Amazon Fresh looks like and why it's so significant in a few minutes. They will continue to manage the sales tax unwinding that's sort of happening state by state at the moment, but we and even Amazon anticipate will be managed federally within about 2 years. And lastly, while it's not as central to our focus today, you will absolutely hear Amazon continue to invest in its media and technology businesses. There are strong rumors that Amazon may launch a smartphone and possibly a living room device for video streaming and gaming as early as this month, rather November. And the reason is pretty straightforward. It's much more profitable to sell products that you don't have to ship compared to products like many of ours that you do have to ship. And so Amazon is fundamentally focused on scaling its incredibly profitable technology and media businesses. So with that as context, let me walk you through the fundamentals of Amazon's growth model. And if you have known me for a while, you know that in a prior life, I spent a lot of my time studying Walmart in a similar level of depth as I've studied Amazon. And the first time I saw this napkin drawing at the top of the slide, which Jeff Bezos drew in around 1997, I almost fell out of my chair because so many elements of Amazon's growth model are nearly identical to Walmart's productivity loop. That is, Amazon perceives itself and positions itself as a fundamentally low-cost business model. I'll describe how they accomplish that. And just as at Walmart, who operates for less and buys for less, that lower cost structure enables them to offer lower prices. And because everybody generally prefers to pay less to paying more, that drives volume, it drives throughput, it helps you leverage your fixed costs, and all of that really connects to what Walmart did in addition to the EDLC, EDLP approach, which is offering one-stop shopping under what at the time was one of the largest brick and mortar store formats that was available. And so Amazon essentially took the unique advantages of the web and offered not just one-stop shopping with 160,000 SKUs, they offer literally millions of SKUs, fundamentally redefining what selection means from a single provider. And a big part of that, as I'll describe, is their third-party marketplace, which helps massive value accrue to Amazon while minimizing the risk Amazon itself absorbs and still putting a lot of the burden on their third-party merchants. So let's start with selection, because if you ask me, out of all of these elements, what is the fundamentally most important to Amazon's success? It is that shoppers today perceive Amazon as selling essentially everything that's available. And in fact, if you've ever had a buyer meeting with Amazon, or a vendor manager, as they're called at Amazon, this is changing a little bit over the last year or two, but historically, it was not unusual for a salesperson to approach Amazon with a full catalog and say, I want to show you my new items and 4 other items that I think are perfect for Amazon. And Amazon would jump directly to saying, well, we'll take everything. Let's talk about how we're going to drive page views and conversion, and let's build a merchandising plan, because we're happy to sell everything that you sell. So the reality is that retailers like Amazon are in the business of selling less of a lot more. There was a book that came out almost a decade ago by Chris Anderson, no relation, the editor of Wired magazine at the time, who really spent most of his energy analyzing the business model of selling digital media, that is MP3s, video, and other really title-driven businesses that had incredible SKU intensiveness, thousands and thousands and thousands of titles, and why the internet made it so much more profitable to sell a much wider selection. But the truth is, with some distinctions, it's also possible to make money selling a much larger assortment online, because you can configure your buildings in a fundamentally different way. And we're not going to go deep today into the configuration of Amazon's fulfillment centers, but suffice it to say that from the outside, while they may look like a traditional brick and mortar distribution center, the level of automation and the level of modularity and the way that those facilities are designed and operated enables Amazon to make money stocking many, many more SKUs, but selling much lower velocities of each SKU. And so when you look at SKU velocity for Amazon and a selection of the other top 25 US retailers, you can see they are in total opposition to a warehouse club model, which by definition is highly limited assortment, but incredibly high productivity or velocity per SKU. Amazon is doing just a tiny fraction of the sales per SKU that a Costco does, but their assortment is orders of magnitude larger. And so if you're a vendor, you have to fundamentally appreciate that the complexity and challenge of scaling any single SKU at Amazon is really, really different than what you're accustomed to in brick and mortar. And while Amazon themselves sometimes compare themselves to the warehouse club business because the econ of the shopper is a little different, you have to think differently about packaging and promotion. One incredibly important distinction is that scaling a SKU and the velocity in any one SKU at Amazon is much more challenging to do. It really is a portfolio strategy. And if you're a brick and mortar retailer or even a non-store competitor to Amazon, more than any other single factor, I repeat, competing with Amazon's perception as being the single source for the world's selection of product is a big challenge. So let me talk momentarily about traffic. Traffic is essential to any retailer, but it is really essential to Amazon. And building on that breadth and depth of selection, Amazon has positioned itself as truly the premier destination for online product research. That is because shoppers expect to find anything that's for sale on Amazon, and because the quality of information about those products on Amazon's product detail pages is so impressive. Not only what manufacturers and Amazon are providing on those detail pages, but especially the ratings and reviews that are submitted by Amazon's own shoppers. Amazon now is the preferred starting point for product research for around 30% of those researching products online, which is over double the percentage that start with Google. So that obviously has big implications for Google's search ad business as more people are doing online product research. But the real importance for Amazon is that Amazon gets massive amounts of essentially free traffic because more than half of visitors to its site actually type Amazon.com in or launch one of its apps directly, which is a massively larger percentage than almost any other online retailer enjoys. They're all spending huge amounts of money on paid search and other forms of paid internet media because people don't naturally think of them as the destination for research and selection. So traffic is one of the real motivations Amazon has to carry a nearly infinite assortment, and they absolutely put a marketing value on every SKU they carry. The marginal cost of listing another SKU, especially if it's not a SKU that they carry in their first party assortment, is essentially zero, but the marketing value can be significant. So let's talk about their third party marketplace for a moment, because when it was launched close to a decade ago, it was one of the more controversial things Bezos ever proposed. In other words, he was going to open his audience of visitors to buy from third parties, essentially competing directly with him. But in retrospect, it was clearly a masterstroke and has become a model that many other retailers, including Walmart, Sears, Best Buy, Tesco, and others, are emulating in some fashion. So I described earlier the basic mechanics of this third-party marketplace. Essentially, anyone, any of us on the line, but also professional sellers, including some relatively large brick and mortar retailers, can establish themselves as merchants on Amazon. And when a product is purchased from a third-party merchant, Amazon takes a percentage fee of the transaction. It varies by category. 13 to 15% is a pretty safe rule of thumb. In certain cases, they also are managing the fulfillment of those third-party sales through a service called Fulfilled by Amazon, abbreviated FBA. And that's another fee-based service Amazon charges based on cube for the storage of the product of the merchandise, and then there are fees for the handling and fulfillment. But here's what you really need to know: the margins, especially on a margin rate basis of this third-party business, are incredible. We've estimated them anywhere between 70 and 85%, because again, when all Amazon is doing is listing the product, and it's actually the merchant who holds the inventory and fulfills the inventory, it's a bit like eBay's business. They don't have to do much to collect revenue. And so over time, all they have to do is keep both buyer and seller happy, and they have a good growth business. And the third-party marketplace had actually been growing at a rate outpacing the first-party business for about 3 years. This most recent quarter, which they just reported on last week, is actually the first quarter since 2010 where the first-party business grew faster than third-party again. But the third-party business has been instrumental in establishing Amazon's dominance from an assortment point of view. It helps them get exposure to niche SKUs or new SKUs that maybe haven't proven their demand, but some third party is willing to sell those products. And if they ultimately are high performing on Amazon, while Amazon denies that they do this, there's evidence to suggest that they do. They see these high performers, and once the risk is taken out of the SKU, we now know that it sells. The Amazon vendor manager will call that manufacturer and say, well, hello there. I noticed you've got a really interesting new product that we seem not to be selling. I'd love to sell it. So the third-party marketplace serves as a market research arm for Amazon in a sense. And it's a very low risk arm that gives them really compelling data into where demand is. Now, it is also one of the greatest sources of tension with brick and mortar players and with manufacturers, because there are all kinds of ways that third-party players decide to build an assortment on Amazon, and more importantly, price that assortment on Amazon. And some of these third-party merchants may be authorized resellers, some may not be, but Amazon's position is that they need to create a marketplace, and the integrity of that marketplace depends on open competition, and therefore they don't make it their business to help manufacturers manage their own supply chains, which is a long-winded way of saying MAP and MSRP violations, while Amazon does take some basic steps to support those in certain cases, for the most part, they view challenges around those topics as the manufacturer's problem and not in their purview. And so there is a very long history of brands trying to find ways to manage this. Very rare exceptions where a manufacturer has succeeded in having Amazon prohibit third parties from selling a certain brand. P&G's Gillette brand is one example, and Amazon's statement is that it was their decision, and it likely was their decision, and the ostensible motivation was due to counterfeiting issues. There are other brands like Nike and Adidas that have made part of their reseller agreements, authorized reseller agreements, a clause that you may not resell on Amazon and other marketplaces. The challenge in that approach is that enforcing those can be problematic because you are fundamentally giving up some short-term volume if you choose to enforce those. And the time and effort of identifying and pursuing all these things is difficult. But I would tell you the tools and approaches to proactively discovering these kind of violations, identifying the violators by establishing a chain of custody throughout your own supply chain. And then, even if it is with an intern who's using some boilerplate from your legal department, issuing takedown requests is increasingly essential to managing the business with Amazon in a sensible way. Because, if you're not paying attention, you better believe that the buyers at your much larger brick and mortar accounts are all over Amazon for their categories on a weekly basis. And if you don't know before they do about irrational pricing on Amazon and have a clear storyline for how you're managing it, your phone will ring and you will be under pressure. So I don't mean to suggest this is a solved problem. We don't think it's going away on any level. It's such an important part of Amazon's business, and they've been pretty clear from the beginning about the principles behind how they operate it. But there absolutely are approaches to manage this issue closer to neutral. So let me spend a moment on customer experience. And that word experience, for a lot of us in the retail industry, has implications about the quality of service and the ambiance of a physical retail environment and how friendly associates are. And I would argue that for Amazon, experience really is about efficiency. Bezos has said for many years that Amazon is in the business of helping people buy, not the business of selling. And they even use this term spearfishers to describe the behavior of their shoppers, because they know their shoppers know exactly what they want to buy. They're looking for it. It's a heavily search-driven trajectory on Amazon's site. And so Amazon has always been all about removing friction and taking steps out of the process of buying what you already know you're looking for. And once you've bought, getting it to you much faster. So you can see all these innovations from Amazon. They were the first to offer free shipping for e-commerce with free Super Saver shipping. They launched a program called Subscribe and Save that is essentially a subscription model for consumables that not only saves you a trip to the store, but saves you a trip back to the site to replenish something you consume with some frequency. They have a patent on one-click buying and many, many other things they've done to make it much more frictionless to buy. Now, that all sounds well and good, but if you're in an impulse category, as an example, it really creates complexity doing business with Amazon, because almost by definition, they are not anxious to interrupt or disrupt a shopper's efficient trajectory through the shopping experience, through the buying experience. So attachment, upsell, impulse merchandising is a much more complicated endeavor online in general, but with Amazon in particular. And it's one of the key challenges that manufacturers in categories like batteries and confection and soft drinks, and really any category that has an element of impulsivity to it, are facing. But I did want to emphasize briefly two really key programs that Amazon has launched that are just essential to understand to understanding their business model. And I'll go out of sequence, actually. Everyone, I think, is familiar with Amazon Prime, which is Amazon's annual membership program, $79, which gives a household free 2-day delivery on eligible SKUs, which are a large and growing percentage of Amazon's assortment. And this was a program modeled after the membership program at Costco, which is no coincidence based on where Amazon and Costco are located. And while Amazon has never publicly disclosed the membership numbers for Prime, we've estimated it north of 10 million. And for the first time ever, just during this most recent quarterly earnings release, Amazon shared that membership grew by millions over the last quarter, which we find to be profound because we know that Prime members tend to order with much greater frequency than non-Prime members, and their annual household spend increases by a multiple of 3 to 5x. So the Prime membership program has been one of the key levers of Amazon's exponential growth, and it fundamentally not only increases annual spend, but locks a household in to shopping with Amazon. And so too does the Subscribe and Save program, which launched in 2007 and is only offered on consumables categories, not all consumables, but some important categories, including baby, which for diapers in particular was one of the categories that, despite some challenges economically, grew to double-digit shares of the category online in a very short period of time, comparatively speaking, because not only was Amazon offering the convenience of skipping the store and not having to revisit the site, they were offering deep discounts, sometimes as much as 20% off of already competitive everyday pricing that really changed the dynamic in those categories. Let me spend a moment now on their cost structure. Here is the essence of the distinction between Amazon and their competition. If you took a composite of a few key brick and mortar players like Walmart and Target and the rest of the top 10, you would find that close to a quarter of their sales, that their assets are close to a quarter of their sales. As everyone appreciates, brick and mortar retail is a heavily fixed asset and a heavily fixed expense business. And while there is a lot of investment required in fulfillment centers, by definition, Amazon's non-store retailing model is much lower, much less asset intensive than brick and mortar retailing. And when you compare the space productivity, including all of Amazon's fulfillment centers, and for example, Walmart's stores and the distribution centers required to serve those stores, with less space, Amazon is more productive per square foot than even Walmart, who is a recognized leader in supply chain and operational efficiency. So it is, simply said, a model that, because it eliminates a little bit of the complexity of routing product from suppliers to distribution centers to stores to homes, you can move more merchandise through less space more efficiently. Amazon's operating expenses as a percentage of sales are not that divergent from brick and mortar players, but the composition of those expenses is fundamentally different. Fulfillment absolutely is the largest component at close to 50%, but you can see since 2008, they've actually been reducing fulfillment as a percentage of their mix. Part of that is driven by growing investments in technology and content as they build out their Kindle family of devices and their streaming investments. But they are also, as they scale, starting to leverage the cost of shipping per unit. And we think that's one of the key levers for their long-term profitability. Let me now spend a minute on Amazon's pricing model, which I know is pretty important to many of you because Amazon prices in a way that many other retailers do not. That is, they price dynamically. Prices change by the hour, certainly change by the day. And there are many inputs to Amazon's pricing algorithm. They crawl their key competitor sites like Walmart.com, Target.com, BestBuy.com. They price against their own third-party platform, as we mentioned, and they also weight ASINs based on importance to category profitability and price perception. All of that is done dynamically. Their vendor managers are actually instructed and penalized not to manually intervene. And all of that drives the selling price, which may or may not be the price displayed to shoppers in the rare cases where they respect MAP policies, and especially if they are below the MAP price, try to respect some of those policies. The real challenge with Amazon's pricing model, as described earlier, is that MAP violations still happen routinely, and the complexity of managing those issues takes all of the effort and capability I described earlier. So that is a whirlwind tour through Amazon's growth model, but I think it's essential to understand. And I want to spend a minute on Amazon Fresh in particular, because it is a departure a little bit from the core growth model, but it will be incredibly important as it begins to scale, if it does. So Amazon, as you may know, has invested billions over the last 48 months in their fulfillment center capabilities. They've opened millions of net new square feet of facilities in the US and internationally, and there are some patterns. The facilities are both getting larger, while at the same time they're opening a different profile of facility that's a little bit smaller, and overall they're getting closer to high density urban areas. We mentioned customer experience and the increasing urgency around convenience. And here's what Amazon Fresh really represents in the end. It really represents the ability, we believe, to offer same-day delivery or at most next-day delivery profitably to as much potentially as 80% of the US population. More realistically, over the next 18 to 36 months, maybe 50% of the population. So let me describe how that's possible. For consumer goods, generally, there are sort of 5 fundamental fulfillment models. The national ship model is Amazon's core fulfillment model. It uses third-party carriers like UPS and FedEx. It tends to be air versus ground-based, and the service areas are very large. This is not local delivery, it's regional, sometimes even national. And those are the orders, remember, that tend to have fewer than 2 items, definitely fewer than 5 items per order. These 4 models to the right are the full basket models. Those are models that may be delivered to the home or might be staged for collection, as in the European drive models and click and collect models. And they could also be fulfilled from a warehouse, as in the case of Fresh Direct, Amazon Fresh, occasionally Peapod, or they could be picked from stores. Here is the significance, though, of these Amazon Fresh expansions. Amazon, just as Walmart and many others before them, is looking to consumables for the frequency of purchase and traffic that will give them the right to merchandise many other products and services to loyal households, most of which will be more profitable than the core grocery business. So Amazon is not jumping into this capital intensive, low margin, logistically difficult online grocery business because they don't see any meaningful competition. It's a really large market and it's easy. They're doing it because they know that at their scale, food and consumables remain one of the only large-scale categories that will move the needle for their top-line growth, both directly as they gradually build awareness and get traction actually selling groceries, but maybe more importantly, as their grocery customers purchase general merchandise products with the groceries. And when you really compare Amazon Fresh to some of their closest competitors like Peapod and Safeway and many others, uh, the single largest distinction to me is that Amazon certainly in the near term doesn't need to make money. That is, they are fundamentally committed to breaking even with Amazon Fresh, as they are in all of their businesses over the long term. But the bigger picture is that Amazon uniquely can offer 500,000 SKUs of general merchandise for delivery with those grocery orders. And so uh, the real intention here is to leverage the growing delivery density that grocery will offer to attach higher margin, much more profitable products delivered even faster in a model that has incredibly high retention levels, incredibly high order frequency, and could potentially be very disruptive to the brick and mortar landscape overall. So I'm not going to walk you through the nuance of this slide, but I would encourage anybody who wants the facts on what's similar or different between these players to study it when you review the materials afterwards. Just to briefly summarize Amazon's growth model, I think all of us respect they are in many ways not the successor to Walmart, but clearly inspired by some of the pillars of Walmart's productivity loop. Fundamentally, EDLC, everyday low cost, uniquely EDLP, everyday low price, through a very different approach than Walmart and others that ultimately has a similar effect. They have a fundamentally different view of what the experience is all about. It's functional, it's about helping people buy. Their cost structure is much less asset intensive than brick and mortar, which enables them to price very differently and gives them the flexibility to carry larger assortments and be more productive with their space in some ways than brick and mortar. And their pricing model, as we've described, is incredibly unique and complex. So let me conclude with just a handful of very quick points about what it means to win with Amazon. And I admit fully this is only scratching the surface. And I encourage anybody who's actually doing business with Amazon or hopes to do business with Amazon to connect with us, because there's a mountain of work behind this. But if your boss asks you in the elevator, what do you do to win with Amazon? Here's what you do. Number one, get your product detail pages right. Because more than anything else you can do, they heavily influence the way you rank in search. And secondly, they are the most influential to your conversion rates. That is the percentage of people who visit the page and actually buy. And there are a lot of nuanced tactics to improving those pages, but suffice it to say, meeting all of Amazon's image requirements at a basic level is essential, but providing high quality, high res images that certainly show the product and then as a bonus show how to use it are a great idea. A lot of detail around features, benefits, and helping people choose among your products is a great idea. And driving as much user-generated engagement as possible is an incredible idea. There's a bit of a magic number, which is simply that once you have 21 reviews with more than 4 stars, you will see an incredible uptick in your conversion rate. That seems to be sort of psychologically the threshold for credibility. So there's a lot more tactics we could review with you, but in the interest of time, let me just mention Amazon has a massive menu of merchandising vehicles and programs, and it's evolving all the time. And all I'll simply say as I wrap up here is it is essential to know which are high value and which are low value. Programs like Strategic Vendor Services, SVS, are a massive investment, hundreds of thousands of dollars with multi-year commitments. But if your volume is sufficient with Amazon, I would argue it's almost essential. There are programs like Subscribe and Save and Vine and several others that are pretty fundamental and have proven ROI. But Amazon asks more of their vendors than many other retailers do, and the number of programs can be overwhelming. So you really do have to be careful in what you invest in. And I would argue, if you really want to take one thing out of the what to do discussion, the power of the auto replenishment model is profound, certainly with Amazon, but even in your own business. That is, at Amazon in particular, Subscribe and Save represents north of 50% of some categories volume, and it has immense benefits for Amazon. The economics of predictable deliveries are much better than the deliveries they have to make on short order. And for a brand, locking shoppers into your SKU indefinitely has huge benefits. So whether you do this on your own e-commerce site or whether you do it with Amazon, I think it's a really important program to pay attention to. And two concluding thoughts that I know will be increasingly important, especially for those that do significant volume with Amazon. They are definitely pushing on vendors in two areas to drive long-term efficiency and profitability. The first of those is in packaging and pack configuration through programs like frustration-free packaging, which strips any secondary packaging that may be unnecessary. Think of clamshells and other packaging that either sells or prevents shrink in the store, but isn't necessary since the shelf is digital with Amazon. And secondly, ships in container products can simply have a label patched on them and can be delivered. Those kinds of questions for manufacturers cause big challenges given the relatively low volumes most are doing. And yet, if you believe Amazon will continue to grow and will be a key customer over the long term, you'll have to find ways of adapting your approach to be more optimal for e-commerce. And secondly, you may have seen the news that just broke publicly recently about the Vendor Flex program, which is a program that actually places Amazon staff in your facilities, warehouse facilities, to take a step out of routing product direct to people's doorsteps. They're doing this with maybe a half dozen manufacturers that have been publicly named. It is a key part, I think, of the long-term path to profitability, but it opens up a lot of questions. And I think it makes a ton of sense if you're doing a lot of volume, and it may also lead to challenges with your traditional customers. Let me just conclude with some questions, if there are any. I know some of you may have been typing questions to the chat window, and I respect that we're at the end of our hour here. So if you need to leave us, I just want to thank everyone for joining us. And for those of you that want to stick around for just a moment, you can hang with me for a few minutes, and I'm just going to look over some of the questions that we got. One of the questions was, how can brands improve search on Amazon? And so I started to key in on the significance of improving your product detail pages. And the reason that's so important is Amazon search results are driven by what they call relevance. and relevance sort of has a few key inputs. One of which is all of the content and keywords on your product detail page. Another of which is what are called glance views, which is simply the number of views to that page. And thirdly, it's the conversion rate or the product's rank within its category. And more than any other single factor, the quality of your product detail pages has positive effects on all three of those things. So if you invest in Amazon's A+ product detail pages, and if you do whatever you can to improve conversion rates, you really do begin this virtuous cycle of selling more by improving conversion rates, which improves your search ranking, which places you higher in search, which improves glance views. And as long as you're doing everything you can to keep conversion rates high, you can continue to ascend the ladder until maybe that SKU is nearing the end of its life cycle. So I think that tactically is one of the most significant things to pay attention to. We have another question about Amazon Fresh specifically, which is, how do you see it expanding? And there's a comment on this $300 Amazon Prime Fresh subscription fee, which I didn't spend much time on, but Amazon is actually running two different customer offers between their Seattle local offer and their Los Angeles offer. And in Seattle, there is no $300 membership requirement, but when they expanded to Los Angeles in June, Amazon introduced a program called Prime Fresh, which is offered only to current Prime members and is an upcharge from the $79 to $300. And it gives those households free grocery delivery, including the 500,000 general merchandise SKUs, on any order over $35. So my sense is it is an experiment, but it's incredibly limiting in terms of who will be willing to make that upfront investment. And I'm really intrigued to see when they go to when they go to San Francisco in a month or so here, whether they offer the same program in San Francisco, because the long-term mandate with Fresh is to make this thing as close to mainstream as it can be. They need to build delivery density, which they can do by targeting higher income neighborhoods initially. But once they've penetrated those neighborhoods, we think they're going to have to try and make it a bit more mainstream than $300 upfront enables it to be. So, we have heard Amazon tell vendors anywhere from 20 to 40 cities are in the consideration set for expansion as early as the end of 2014. Based on all of the complexity of scaling a full basket local grocery delivery business, we think the actual rollout may be more realistically a half dozen to a dozen markets over the next year. And even that's not a foregone conclusion. But we think that two factors are predictive of where they'll go. Density of high income households is a really big predictor. And secondly, the population's scale. Minimum 1 million, more realistically 2 or 3 million, is the sort of threshold you need to be viable. And so we think New York for sure, San Francisco, Chicago, Dallas, perhaps Denver, Phoenix, possibly somewhere in Florida. I emphasize all of those, with the exception of New York, are largely speculation on our part. But that's a way to think about it. So I just want to thank everyone again, especially for hanging with me a few minutes past 2 o'clock. As I said at the beginning of our session today, this is a heavily condensed version of a mountain of work on Amazon. And we and our friends at GMDC encourage you, if you have more specific questions for us, whether you're a retailer or a manufacturer, please don't hesitate to connect with us and let us know what we can do to help. But thanks to everyone for your time today. and good to be with you again. Go Red Sox tonight, and we hope to speak with all of you again soon. Take care.